Have you ever wondered why a man who once held you so tightly suddenly feels like a stranger beside you? Why the arms that once made you feel like home now feel distant, cold, unreachable? It's confusing, isn't it? When the same lips that whispered forever now fall silent. When the warmth fades but the love hasn't disappeared. There's a moment every woman remembers. A shift so subtle, yet so heavy, it breaks something inside her. You notice his eyes don't stay on you as long as they used to. His touch lingers less. His laughter feels distracted, as if his mind has already stepped outside the room. And you wonder, did I do something wrong? Was I not enough? Or worse, was I too much? This is the quiet storm that women fear. The withdrawal, the retreat, the fading of presence. And it hurts, because the heart cannot understand what the mind tries to rationalize. But here's the truth most women never hear. A man pulling away is not always about you. Sometimes it's about the shadows he never learned to face, the fears he never found words for, the weight of love he doesn't know how to carry. Men are not taught to hold intimacy the way women do. Love asks them to be vulnerable, exposed, seen. And for many, that feels like standing on a cliff edge with no ground beneath their feet. So he steps back, not because he doesn't love you, but because love terrifies him. Yet, you feel it as rejection. You feel it as abandonment. Because when he retreats, your own wounds wake up. The part of you that once felt unseen, unheard, unloved, rises to the surface. And suddenly, his silence doesn't feel like his fear. It feels like your unworthiness. That's the cruel trick heartbreak plays. It confuses his walls with your reflection. But pause here. Ask yourself gently, is his distance proof that you are unlovable? Or is it proof that he is afraid to love fully? When men pull away, they often run toward the illusion of control. Work, distraction, silence. Anything that lets them feel less vulnerable, less raw. Women, on the other hand, move closer when afraid they reach for love, crave connection, beg for reassurance. So when he pulls away and you pull closer, the gap between you stretches wider until the thread snaps. And what remains is pain that neither of you knows how to name. It is not your fault. It is not his fault. It is the dance of fear and longing that love awakens in us all. But here's the question lingering in your chest. If he loves me, why can't he stay? Why can't he fight his fear the way I fight mine? Why must I bleed while he hides? The answer is hidden in a truth so simple, yet so devastating. Love exposes every hidden wound. For some, that exposure becomes a reason to grow. For others, it becomes a reason to retreat. And the one thing you must remember is this: his choice to step back does not define your worth. But what happens next? What happens when the man you love disappears into silence while your heart is still reaching for him? Do you chase? Do you wait? Or do you learn the art of letting go before you lose yourself completely? The choice will shape not only your relationship, but your soul. And perhaps that is where the deeper truth lies. You replay the moments in your mind, don't you? The late-night talks when his voice was soft and steady. The way his hand found yours in a crowded room as if you were the only anchor he needed. The promises whispered between kisses. Promises that felt unshakable. And yet, now, silence, distance. A love that feels half alive. And here is the hardest part. The human heart doesn't know how to let go of almost. It clings to what was, begging the present to turn back into the past. You keep asking yourself, if he loved me then, how can he not love me now? But love does not vanish overnight. It hides, it trembles, it battles the ghosts that live inside him. For many men, intimacy is a mirror that shows them their own insecurities, their deepest flaws, their lack of control. To be loved by you is to be seen fully, and that terrifies him. Because what if, once you see everything, you decide he's not enough? His distance is not always rejection, it is self-preservation. But self-preservation, when left unspoken, feels like abandonment. And here you are, caught between the ache of holding on and the fear of letting go. Every message, unanswered, feels like a dagger. Every delayed call feels like a confession. And every quiet night makes you wonder if your worth is slipping through his hands. But pause. Feel this truth. His silence is not a measurement of your beauty, your value, or your soul. His distance is a reflection of his battle, not your failure. Yet your heart translates it differently. Your heart whispers lies. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I was not enough. Maybe love was never real. Do you see how cruel the cycle is? His fear awakens your fear. His withdrawal stirs your wounds. And suddenly, the relationship is no longer two people in love. It is two children inside adult bodies, both afraid, both guarding themselves, both hoping the other will bridge the gap. But here is where wisdom enters. Love cannot survive when fear is louder than truth. A man who pulls away is not always lost to you, but he cannot return through your chasing, your pleading, your endless proving of your worth. Because love is not proven through begging, it is proven through being. So ask yourself this: what happens when you stop chasing? When you step back, not in anger, not in pride, but in self-respect? What happens when instead of filling the silence with your desperation, you let the silence echo back to him, his own choices? Something shifts. Because men do not fall in love with a woman who loses herself to keep him. They fall in love with a woman who stands in her own worth, who can face his distance without collapsing, who can say, I love you, but I will not abandon myself for you. And this is the paradox you must understand. The moment you stop fearing his distance is often the moment he begins to fear losing you, because suddenly he sees what he never saw before: your strength, your wholeness, your refusal to be defined by his uncertainty. But strength does not make the ache vanish, does it? You still lie awake, wondering if he will come back, if love can ever feel safe again, if your heart will ever stop asking why. And maybe the deeper question is this: if he cannot meet you in love's fullness, are you willing to keep shrinking just to hold on to half of him? Or will you dare to hold on to all of yourself, even if it means losing him? You feel it in your body before your mind even names it. The tension in your chest, the hollow in your stomach, the ache in your throat every time you want to ask, what's wrong? But you swallow it down because you're afraid of the answer. His distance becomes the air you breathe, heavy and invisible, suffocating without sound. And when you do speak, when you dare to ask, his answers are vague, blurred, slipping through your fingers. I'm just tired. I've been busy. It's nothing. But you always know. A woman's intuition is rarely wrong. His words say one thing, but his energy says another. And you start bargaining with yourself, trying to believe him even when everything inside you screams the opposite. Why? Because love makes you fight for illusions longer than you should. Because your heart is so generous, it would rather break slowly than admit the truth quickly. Because the thought of losing him feels heavier than the weight of his silence. But pause. Look closer. Why do you cling so tightly to someone who is already slipping away? The answer lives in the oldest wound of all: fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of starting over. Fear of not being chosen again. Fear that maybe this was your only chance at love. That if you let go, no one will love you like he did. But that is the lie pain whispers to keep you trapped. The truth? You were whole before him. You will be whole after him. Love does not create your worth. It only reflects it. And if his reflection is fading, it does not mean your light has dimmed. Still, I know. The ache of absence is louder than wisdom at 2 a.m. The bed feels colder. The silence feels endless. And you ask yourself, how can he walk away from something so real? How can someone who once swore forever now hesitate at the thought of tomorrow? Here is what most never tell you. Men do not always pull away because they've stopped loving you. Sometimes they pull away because love demands too much truth. It asks them to face parts of themselves they've avoided their whole lives. It asks them to be vulnerable when they've been trained to be invincible. It asks them to stay when their instincts scream to run. But his fear does not excuse your suffering. And his silence does not mean you must silence yourself. You cannot bleed endlessly to keep love alive. You cannot keep pouring from a heart he refuses to hold. So what do? You stop begging for scraps. You stop chasing footsteps that are walking away. You stop twisting yourself into smaller shapes just to fit inside the space he allows. Instead, you turn inward. You breathe. You remember who you were before he touched you. You stand tall in the truth that even if he cannot love you fully, you can. And here lies the choice that burns but also frees. Will you keep waiting for him to choose you, or will you choose yourself first? Because love is not meant to be a battlefield where you lose yourself to win someone else. It is meant to be a home, a shelter, a place where two souls meet without fear. If he cannot build that with you, then you must ask, why should you burn just to keep him warm? And still, a whisper lingers in your heart. What if he comes back? What if, after all this distance, he realizes what he's lost? Will you be ready to take him in again? Or will you have already learned the strength of standing without him? There's a quiet desperation that comes when you wait for someone who no longer shows up for you. The kind of waiting that turns days into questions, nights into doubts. You replay conversations, searching for clues. You analyze your own words, your tone, your every gesture, as if somewhere in your love there was a hidden mistake that pushed him away. And still, the answer slips through your hands like smoke. But hear this, you are not the reason a man runs from his own heart. You cannot carry his unfinished battles. You cannot heal wounds he won't even name. And yet women are taught to try, taught to fix, to nurture, to hold on longer than they should, taught that love means sacrificing until there's nothing left of themselves. And that is where heartbreak becomes most dangerous. Not in his leaving, but in your forgetting. Forgetting the sound of your own laughter. Forgetting the strength of your own soul. Forgetting that before his love, there was you, and you were enough. So ask yourself, why does his absence feel like the end when it is only a chapter? Why do you treat his silence as a verdict when it is simply a revelation? He is showing you who he is when love asks too much of him. He is showing you the limits of his courage, the edges of his capacity. Believe him, because the truth is, men who pull away often return. They come back when the silence becomes heavier than the love they left. They come back when they realize no distraction quiets the echo of your presence. They come back when it's safe again, when they think you will still be waiting. And here lies the question that burns inside your chest. If he does return, will you still want him? For when a man leaves without explanation, he does not just create distance, he creates doubt. And doubt, once planted, never truly disappears. You can forgive. You can try again. But in the quiet moments, the question will always whisper, will he run again? And that is why your healing cannot depend on his choices. Healing begins the moment you stop watching the door and start looking in the mirror. When you remind yourself that your worth does not rise and fall with his presence. When you realize that love was never about losing yourself to keep him, but finding yourself even if he leaves. But let this truth pierce you. Sometimes, the one who walks away is also the one who teaches you the deepest lesson. The lesson that love is not meant to be begged for. The lesson that the right man does not pull away when love grows heavier. He stays, he fights, he leans in. So the question is no longer, why did he leave? The real question is, why are you still holding on to someone who couldn't stay? And yet, I know the heart resists logic. The heart still aches, still longs, still waits for the echo of footsteps that may never return. But perhaps this ache is not meant to destroy you. Perhaps it is meant to rebuild you. Perhaps it is the fire that burns away the illusion, so you can finally stand in the truth. You deserve a love that stays. But can you let go of the fantasy long enough to see reality? Can you stop waiting for him long enough to meet yourself again? It's strange, isn't it, how the heart can still crave the very person who caused its deepest wounds? How even in the silence, even in the distance, you still imagine his voice, his touch, his return. That is the cruelty of attachment. It binds you not only to the joy you once felt, but also to the pain that now defines you. Psychologists call it intermittent reinforcement, the pattern of being loved fully one day, then abandoned the next. Your heart gets addicted to the high of his presence and terrified of the low of his absence. It is the same cycle that keeps gamblers pulling the lever, hoping for one more win, no matter how much they've lost. And in love, it keeps you waiting for breadcrumbs, mistaking them for a feast. But here is the piercing truth. Love that keeps you starving is not love, it is control. And the longer you accept it, the deeper you bury yourself in the soil of his inconsistency. You begin to shrink, to bend, to rewrite yourself, hoping that this time you will be enough for him to stay. And yet, you were never the problem. The problem is that he does not know how to hold the gift you are. He mistakes tenderness for weakness. He mistakes your patience for permission. He mistakes your love for something he can step in and out of without consequence. But there comes a moment when something inside you snaps not in anger, but in clarity. The moment you realize that waiting for him is the same as abandoning yourself. That every time you forgive without change, you teach him that your heart is a revolving door, that your love is unconditional, yes, but not unboundaried. And this is where the rebirth begins. Not in his return, not in his apology, not in the crumbs he will surely scatter when he feels your absence. Rebirth begins when you stop asking, "Why did he leave?" and start asking, "Why am I still here?" Do you see the shift? The power leaves his hands and returns to yours. Because love was never meant to chain you, it was meant to free you. And sometimes the only way to find that freedom is to walk away from the very thing you thought you could not live without. He may come back, he may not. But your healing cannot hinge on his decision. Your worth cannot wait for his recognition. And your future cannot be built on the shaky ground of someone else's fear. So let this be the question that guides you now. If you were to love yourself the way you once loved him, fiercely, patiently, completely, what would your life begin to look like? Because the day you turn that love inward is the day the ache loses its grip, the day his silence no longer defines you, the day his absence becomes nothing more than space you needed to finally find yourself again. But are you ready for that? Are you ready to let go of the story where you are always waiting, always hoping, always hurting? Are you ready to step into the story where you are chosen first? By you, there comes a night when the tears finally run dry. Not because the pain is gone, but because your soul is too tired to keep breaking in the same places. You sit in the quiet and realize something you never dared to admit before. You cannot keep bleeding for someone who refuses to stop cutting. And that realization feels both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because letting go feels like death. Liberating because for the first time, you see a glimpse of life beyond him. The chains are not as heavy as they once seemed. The door is not as locked as you believed. And deep down, a voice whispers, maybe the love you were searching for was never in his hands to give, it was always in yours to reclaim. Men pull away for many reasons. Fear, immaturity, the weight of intimacy, the lies they tell themselves about what it means to be strong. But you too pull away when you stop abandoning yourself for the sake of someone who cannot stay. You pull away from the lies, from the illusion, from the ache that once held you captive. And in that pulling away, you return to yourself. This is the paradox of heartbreak. The very pain that shatters you also becomes the doorway to your strength. The distance that once felt unbearable becomes the space where you finally breathe again. The silence that haunted you becomes the quiet in which your own voice grows louder, clearer, unshakable. And then something unexpected happens. The more you step into your own worth, the less you crave his return. The more you nurture your own heart, the less you bleed for his absence. The more you love yourself, the less room there is for someone who never truly stayed. If he comes back, and many do, he will find a woman transformed. Not the one who begged for love, but the one who commands it by the way she carries herself. Not the one who accepted crumbs, but the one who has learned to feast on her own wholeness. He may realize too late what he lost, and you will face the hardest, most beautiful question of all. Do you even want him anymore? Because healing shifts the entire story. It teaches you that love is not about possession, but presence. Not about clinging, but choosing. Not about proving, but simply being. And when you understand this, you no longer settle for men who run at the first sign of intimacy. You no longer chase after those who mistake your heart for a shelter they can abandon whenever the storm feels too heavy. You stand tall, rooted, radiant. And love, real love, will recognize you. Because the kind of man who deserves you does not pull away when things get deep. He stays. He leans in. He matches your vulnerability with his own. He understands that love is not weakness, but the greatest courage of all. So now, the final truth lingers before you. The man who pulled away may have broken your heart, but he also handed you the gift of yourself. And the only question left is this: will you take it? Because once you do, You will never again lose yourself in the absence of another. You will never again beg for what should be freely given. You will never again confuse distance with destiny. The truth is simple, eternal, unshakable. You deserve a love that stays. And the call is clear. Stop waiting at closed doors and start walking through the ones that open only when you choose yourself first.